Hi everyone, my name is Josh Rosenberg, and it's a pleasure to have the chance to tell you a little bit about my path through my PhD program and to my current position. On that note, I am a not quite new, starting my second year assistant professor of STEM education at the University of Tennessee in Knoxville. And I learned a lot over the last year and had a great but also long and challenging doctoral experience. And I hope to share just a little bit about both of those those things in this video. So I'll start with my background and my PhD program. I came to my PhD program having taught at a public high school in North Carolina, and I knew I wanted to study. Ed tech, and that was really my focus coming out of teaching and starting a grad program. I was interested in mobile devices. I was also interested in what I was calling context, or all of the stuff around the technologies that we use. So things like professional development and adequate resources at school and at home for students, and other things that might shape how technologies are used. In the first year of my PhD program, which was at Michigan State, I got involved in a science ed project and sort of felt like I was able to bring together my two different interests in ed tech and in science ed. And I worked on a science ed project, not as a research assistant, so not for many hours a week, but I worked roughly 5 to 10 hours a week for most of the rest of my time at Michigan State on that science ed project, and that really kind of anchored my my interest in my program, even though I came in with a very kind of a very different focus on ed tech. And so I over time was trying to explore this interest in context around technology. And I did that first by looking at how researchers had described context when they looked at teachers' technological pedagogical content knowledge, or their TPAC. And I did a systematic review. That was one of my first studies. We had a practicum study at Michigan State, and this was the first thing that I did. And so I was interested in doing something more with context, and my advisor at the time, Matt Kaler, suggested to me that I take some classes that would help me to think about and investigate context. So my idea was that I would do I had this idea that I would do a phenomenological study. At first I was going to say ethnography. It's been a while since I thought about this, but I remember talking to my advisor about this, and he said, that sounds, I understand why, but I'm going to suggest you take this other class. And that was a more it was a more common methodological class. This was on, I'll spare the details, but that class involved some statistical analyses, and that got me interested in doing statistics for the first time. I remember doing my first t-test after doing a workshop with teachers around mobile devices. You can maybe see some of the threads coming together here, or at least some of the threads being present. I started to do more with statistics and take more classes at Michigan State on them, and sort of got pretty far afield from, at least methodologically, that interest in phenomenology, and started to think about how students work with data as a part of their science learning. The science project that I worked on had kids working with data in some ways, but it wasn't really much the focus. And so I sort of went from my own interest in doing statistics to thinking about how students can and do statistics, and how to make their work with statistics more relevant to them and more meaningful, and maybe more empowering, at least in terms of them being able to analyze data that is maybe part of their something they experience in their day-to-day lives, or even data that they create themselves. So for my dissertation, I studied the experiences students have through the lens of engagement theory when they worked with data. And I thought about engagement in terms of different dimensions. So the three dimensions I focused on were affective, behavioral, and cognitive engagement. And I thought of work with data in terms of a 5-step process that started with asking questions and involved making observations and recording information or recording observations as data, analyzing or modeling the data that students collect, and then how they interpret and communicate the findings. And I found that some of these activities seem to be more engaging than others, specifically modeling data and recording data seem to be associated with higher levels of engagement overall. Sort of to my surprise, there weren't many differences across those 3 dimensions of engagement that I looked at. So, so that dissertation kind of really kept my focus on, it really was focused on this specific interest around work with data, which was really different than what I came in interested in, which was mobile learning and context. And it was also different from the science ed sort of experiences that I had in graduate school. That interest is still something I'm very focused on. And in the last year in my new job at the University of Tennessee, as I mentioned, I won't say the location again, I worked with a 6th grade teacher to try to figure out how we can bring open geoscience data into the classroom. And we used a tool called the Common Online Data Analysis Platform, or CODAP, that's browser-based and easy for, in this case, middle school students to use, to start to think about how they can process and wrangle and make sense of these kind of larger, more complex data sets. I'm also still interested in doing some statistical analyses in my own research too. One of the methods I'm interested in particularly is social network analysis, and I've just been working on a project. So this involves a little bit more technology, especially this project, which is a social network analysis of social media data, specifically conversations through a hashtag that's Science at Focus, the NGSS chat, or Next Generation Science Standards chat hashtag. So I'd love to share more about that work and hope to be able to soon. That work is still sort of in progress. I mentioned that I would say a little bit about my last year in this new role. The job search was really challenging. I applied far and wide. Basically, after finishing up at Michigan State, which took me 6 years, I applied kind of to any job that looked interesting and looked possibly like something I'd be qualified for. And those were jobs in ed tech, in science ed, and in science ed and teacher ed, and in sort of ed psych or the learning sciences, sort of these related fields. And ended up at in a STEM ed position, which felt like a really good fit for me because I could pursue my science ed questions and my ed tech questions and sort of blend them together in some cases. And so I felt really fortunate to end up in the job, which is science ed in a teacher ed department where I am now. My first year was a lot of learning. It almost felt like being in my first year of grad school again, from sort of trivial things like trying to figure out how to print something to bigger things like how do I know how to report grades, or how do I try to pursue applying for this grant opportunity? Who do I even talk to? Where do I even start? After my first year, I feel a lot more kind of firmly established now, and I'm looking forward to this coming year. I should say, I was hoping to have the chance to talk with you all virtually, and the timing just didn't quite work out. So I hope this video shared a little bit about my own path in my PhD program, and I hope that I know that you're in good hands, and hope that your experiences are challenging but also rewarding, and that at the end of it you are able to find the job you want and pursue the ideas and work that you want to too. I'll mention you can follow me on Twitter. I like to interact there. My username on Twitter is jrosenberg6432, and I also have a website where I try to post a lot of when possible, papers and presentations and other resources. And that's just my name, joshuamrosenberg.com. And I'd be happy to hear from you. Thanks.